Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Given here, back in another video. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Anivia in the mid lane. If you ever really wanted to control the battlefield with ice walls, you want to zone entire teams off objectives and just scale into a late game monster that can 1v9 fights, then Anivia is going to be your champion. But like all other champions in the game, she does come with her own unique strengths and weaknesses, and knowing how to play around them is what separates a good from a terrifying one. So let's first go over some of her strengths. So her passive rebirth essentially gives her an extra life every few minutes, which makes her really hard to punish. She's also really good with her zoning tools. Her W Crystallize is a very versatile utility spell, and you can use this to block choke points and cut off enemy escapes. She has some of the best wave clear in the game, as well as her siege, and that's due to her ultimate Glacial Storm lets her melt waves and just pressure towers non-stop. And she's also really great in team fights. So there's not as many mages in the game that can control entire zones and areas as well as Anivia, and she kind of forces the enemy team to fight on her terms. Now, some of the weaknesses is she does struggle quite a bit pre-6. Right before you unlock your ultimate, before you get that pressure in lane, you're going to want to focus really on farming safely under your turret. You do not have a ton of agency in the early game. On top of that, another weakness is her egg cooldown, right? If that is on cooldown, if your passive is on cooldown, you're pretty much a sitting duck, and enemies are going to punish you during that window. Another weakness is you are pretty mana hungry, so without tier and without blue buff, you really can't keep your ultimate running forever. So she does have quite a bit of resource management, and she's also extremely immobile. She has no dashes, she has no blinks. If you get caught, you're probably in trouble. So let's just quickly look over her abilities. Her passive rebirth, we talked about this earlier. On death, you become an egg with a chance to respawn. This is game changing. This is also pretty strong with something like Zanya's Hourglass. It's going to give you a long time that people are going to have to kind of sit on top of you to kill you. We also have her Q, Flash Frost, just a slow moving projectile that stuns and damages whenever you detonate it. Really good for setups. Just takes some practice to land this consistently. We also have her W Crystallize, so your iconic wall. You can use to block paths, catch opponents, and just kind of peel. Really good in team fights, and a good wall can completely change the outcome of a team fight. So you do have a little more agency in anything that involves like a choke point. Next we have her E, Frostbite, so your bread and butter damage ability. It actually does double damage if the target is chilled by your Q or your ultimate. And finally we have her ultimate, her Glacial Storm, just a massive AoE of zone control. Shreds waves and melts teams and forces enemies to scatter. So your skill order is going to be E, Q, and then W, and then points into ultimate whenever possible. Some of your spells will be Flash, Teleport. For your runes, you're going to be running in the primary tree Domination, Electrocute, Cheap Shot, Grizzly Mementos, and Relentless Hunter. So Electrocute for that burst trade potential, Cheap Shot for the extra damage on CC, Mementos just kind of help keep you safe. And then Relentless Hunter is going to give us that out-of-combat movement speed. Your secondary is going to be Precision, so Presence of Mind for mana sustain, Coup de Grace to help execute those low HP enemies with your E. And then your rune shards are going to be attack speed, just for a little bit easier farming early game, Adaptive Force, and scaling health. For your core build path, you're going to go Rod of Ages. It's going to give you scaling, tankiness, and mana. It's a perfect first item on Anivia. We'll follow that up with our Sorcerer's Shoes, going to give us that magic pin and movement speed. And then we'll go into an Archangel's Staff, which will then convert into our Seraph's Embrace later. So that's going to give us both mana sustain and shields. And then situational and late game, you're going to be going Lianji's Torment. So this pairs very, very well with your ultimate for that burn damage in team fights. Zanya's Hourglass to help you survive even more burst damage. It's really good for when your egg is on cooldown. You do have a little bit more of a safety net there to kind of save yourself. And then finally, Rabadon's Death Cap, just a huge late game power spike. Talking a little bit about her early game, we did kind of go over this earlier, but it's all about survival. It's all about farming. You don't really win too many trades pre-6, so you really want to focus on last hitting with autos and just E whenever you possibly can. You want to use your Q pretty sparingly. It does cost a lot of mana early game to spam, and you want to keep your wave near your tower, and you just want to kind of avoid ganks. It's also a good idea to kind of communicate this with your jungler early game. Say, hey, you know, if you are looking for early skirmishes, I'm not going to be the best person you want to skirmish with. Maybe look to skirmish more top side with your top laner. Another thing you're going to focus on early game, and this is another thing that kind of hurts her early power spikes, is you rush a Tear of the Goddess for mana stacking, so you lose some AP by doing that. Going into the mid game, once you get your Rod of Ages and once you're level 6, you kind of start to control the game a little bit more. Your wave clear with your R is really what's going to keep you in the game, and you want to keep that pressure on mid lane, and then you want to kind of rotate with your team to secure, dragons or herald, but you really do want to dominate that mid lane pressure, and you want to keep some form of siege on the enemy's tower. And this is where you're a great assassin counter as well, because you can keep that wave shoved in, and it's just very difficult to roam against an Anivia past level 6. Mid-game, you also be looking to use your W to block jungle paths and just cut off enemies at objectives. And you're also just looking for picks with your QE combo. Remember that mid-game is where you shine as a control mage, and your team should play around your ability to set up fights. And thankfully for Anivia, she gets even stronger in the late game. You're kind of the team fight anchor in your specific composition. You want to drop your ultimate in choke points. That's going to make it really difficult for people to disengage from the fight, or in a choke point that your team can kind of fall back into. Your ultimate kind of works as a safety net for your team depending on where you place it, or can work as a death trap for the enemy team. Again, you're going to focus on zoning as much as you possibly can between your ultimate and your W. That's really where Anivia shines. And then, of course, we have our late game objective control. And, at this stage of the game, you are really less of a burst mage, and you're more of an aerial denial champion. So again, Anivia is a team fighting champion more than anything. Obviously, she can push a lane pretty well, but she's pretty easy to catch out if you do overextend with Anivia, so you wouldn't be playing around your team late. Look at her basic combo. You're going to drop your ultimate on the target. You're going to follow that up with an auto plus E for that double damage. You're going to use your Q for the stun. Follow that up with a W to trap them, and then use another auto to finish. The key to this is layering your CC so they can't escape. So you use your ultimate to slow, and that's going to make your Q much easier to land. And then you kind of trap them with that WR. So closing thoughts on Anivia, she's not a super easy champion. She does take some patience, some mana management, and great positioning. But if you do master her, you will control team fights like very few other champions can. Anivia is a late game scaling, zoning, and late game powerhouse. And Anivia is, just like any champion in the game, is S tier in the right hands. If you guys enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. See you on the next one.